So, welcome everyone for the SAROA webinar series. Let me just take a moment to say what SAROA is. So, SAROA stands for South Asia Regional Hub on Ocean Acidification, and it is one of the youngest regional hubs for the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. Go on. Through SAROA webinar, we aim to spread awareness about the ocean acidification and promote the development of national hubs for effective monitoring of ocean acidification and carry out capacity building activities geared towards early career researcher following the best practices led by the GOEON. So SAROA is established to cover the countries surrounded by the regional seas and the oceans across South Asia. And the main aim of SAROA and the GOAN is a collaborative international network designed to improve our understanding of global ocean acidification, to improve our understanding of ecosystem response to ocean acidification, and to acquire and exchange data and knowledge necessary to optimize the modeling of ocean acidification and its impact. So in the third talk in the SAROA webinar series, today we have the guest speaker, Dr. Abed El Rahman Hossain. He is a scientist researcher from Geomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research, Kiel in Germany. Dr. Abed has completed his BSc and MSc studies from Lebanese University in Lebanon. He did his PhD in oceanography in co-direction between the University of Perpignan in France and National Center for Marine Sciences in Lebanon. Post-PhD, Abed joined as a lecturer at a Lebanese university in Faculty of Public Health, and since 2022, he is working as a scientist in Geomar Helmholtz Center for Ocean Research Kiel in the Marine Biogeochemistry Division. His research interest includes understanding biogeographic trends in the context of climate change, with a special attention to ocean acidification, effect of climate change on marine phytoplankton, monitoring of coastal environmental conditions in the context of both climate change and ocean acidification, and in particularly in the Mediterranean Sea. He is also studying harmful algal bloom and their biotoxins. He is involved in ocean acidification literacy and outreach activities, and he's associated with several agencies as an expert member. He is a co-champion in the Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, Ocean Decade Program Outcome 6. He is a chair of Ocean Acidification Mediterranean Hub, and Dr. Abed is a scientific member in GOEON Executive Council since 2019. He has received several grants and funding from different agencies for his research work and participated in several marine and coastal expeditions, particularly in the Mediterranean Sea. He is actively involved in the knowledge dissemination through participating in international workshops, seminar, webinars, and he has published tens of papers in peer-reviewed journal and contributed towards various technical and policy writing reports. So with this brief introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Abed to enlighten us with his talk today.
Oh, thank you so much, Amit, for this fantastic and long introduction. Thank you so much. And I hope that this presentation actually will give like a bit of like a glimpse of what we are doing actually in the Mediterranean Sea, and to inspire our colleagues our colleagues in India, but also in the SAROA hub and beyond, to be inspired by our activities a little bit, and also to trigger a little bit of maybe collaborations, exchanges, etc. And this is really crucial nowadays. So I'm so glad to be here to be talking about the OA Med Hub, which is the Ocean Acidification Mediterranean Hub. As you've mentioned, Amit, so this hub is actually one of the regional hubs to go on. So like here to also to recognize the of the steering committee. So we do have a steering committee that's actually formed of members who represent Mediterranean countries that are affiliated to our hub. it shows the diversity of our hub, and this is so much needed because, I mean, without the diversity, even in science, we cannot really do so much things. So I'm not going to talk so much about the climate change and the scientific background of it, but I will just give brief notes about why we've established the. So we all know that we are witnessing climate change consequences due to greenhouse gases emissions, carbon dioxide, and that's as mentioned in the IPCC, many IPCC reports, that's directly related to anthropogenic contributions and to the direct emissions of CO2 in the atmosphere. And the final actually receptacle of atmospheric CO2 is the ocean. So the ocean is with continuous let's say exchanges of CO2, but also other gases and substances with the atmosphere. And this is something very, very natural. However, because of this excessive emissions of CO2 in the ocean is also taking more and more and higher concentrations of CO2 as well. So today's rates of increase of CO2 in the atmosphere is 100 times faster than it used to be. And look at the CO2 now. CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere from time series stations that's monitoring the CO2, the atmospheric CO2, in one of the stations, like for example in Hawaii, which is one of the oldest CO2 atmospheric stations for measurement of this parameter, we can see that it's now more than 418 ppm, which is it's like a breaking record. And this actually has lots of consequences. So like also we are witnessing for sure the warming of air, but also lots of consequences in the ocean. So it's not only in the atmosphere, but also in the ocean, where we are witnessing already a warming, ocean warming, but also acidification as well. Is related, of course, to the excessive absorption of CO2. And after a series of chemical reactions, this CO2 is being transformed into carbonic acid, which is decreasing the pH. This is not actually documented in only one time series station, but many time series stations around the world. So not only in Hawaii, but also in the Canary Islands, in Bermuda, etc. And we do have the same time series patterns. So we do have ocean warming, we do have ocean acidification. This is something, it's a fact. And also in the Mediterranean Sea, here I was talking globally. If we were gonna focus a little bit on the Mediterranean Sea and just like to justify why we needed to establish an OA hub, a hub dedicated for ocean acidification in the Mediterranean Sea, based on the latest Mediterranean assessment report that was published by MEDAC, which is the Mediterranean Experts on Climate and Environmental Change. The Mediterranean Sea is under multi-stressor pressures. So these are pressures directly actually related to anthropogenic activities and to anthropogenic pressures like terrestrial runoff, nutrients inputs and pollution, but also the excessive emissions of nearby countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea of CO2. And this is actually causing so much changes related also to climate change, like, for example, the sea level rise, deoxygenation, etc., but also ocean acidification and ocean warming. And these have serious effects on the marine life of the Mediterranean Sea that has really very unique ecosystems, like, for example, changes in the trophic relationships, impacts on biodiversity and nursery effects. So these are affecting the resources of the Mediterranean, which is surrounded by around 22 countries, which is also threatening then the livelihoods of millions of people that are actually relying on these resources. So as I've mentioned previously about what is ocean acidification, so after a series of after the absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere by the ocean, and after a series of chemical reactions, there is production of carbonic acid, and this is already happening now. And the projections are not really that optimistic, unfortunately, because the acidity is expected to increase by around 130% by the end of this century. So that's why, because the global ocean, it's actually threatened, we needed a global approach. And we know that the increase of acidity in the ocean will actually also decrease the availability of important calcium carbonate ions that are used by many biological groups to build their skeletons. And these species and groups, biological groups, are essential in the marine trophic chain. And that's why GOA-ON has been formed. So in order to gather all ocean acidification scientists working on biogeochemistry and ocean carbon studies, etc., from all over the world, to have a shared vision of how to better understand this threat, and to also work together on establishing standards, best practices, and to better study the biological responses and to refine the models. So in 2013, we've been around 150 scientists, and now we are more than 900. I think we are 1,000 scientists from more than 105 countries. And this is also applied to the Mediterranean. So the Mediterranean, as many of you know, is surrounded by lots of, let's say, nations who were there since like decades ago and benefiting so much from the sea, from the Mediterranean Sea, for their livelihoods. Like, for example, the Phoenicians, then the Greeks, etc. The Romans actually called it Mare Nostrum, our sea. And from that concept of our sea, and because our resources that are lying in this sea depends on our future actions, now we have to establish something that unite us. But also, if we look at it more economically, the Mediterranean Sea is overfished and it has lots of other pressures as well. And these pressures are affecting its vulnerable communities. Besides that, the Mediterranean Sea is a maritime shipping hub. It's harvesting more than 20% of the seaborne trade worldwide, with more than 200 million passengers. And thus, it's affected by so much pressures like the rising CO2 emissions due to these activities, pollution, marine litter. What's really also very concerning was the recent report that I've mentioned that was published that also more than 40% of endemic fish species could be extinct by the end of the century in the Mediterranean Sea. And the acidity is for sure expected to exacerbate, but also temperature, etc. So that's why we needed really to establish the OA hub, because we were aware of the different consequences on key marine ecosystems, like, for example, the corals in the Mediterranean Sea, etc. So we are so far, I think, 9 regional hubs, but 2 are now newly somehow established. So, but so far, the already existing ones are. And the OA hub is one of these regional hubs. We are gathering 100 members from 14 Mediterranean countries. This is something for us that's huge because of lots of political issues happening. See that many of you are aware of. So uniting lots of scientists from different Mediterranean countries is something always good. So the goals are always to improve the communication between the Mediterranean Ocean Acidification study and understand this phenomena, but also to promote community best practices and standards, and to support all capacity building activities, trainings, in order to really spread the know-how, I mean, the methodologies on how to measure the carbonate system, what are the accepted uncertainties, how to study the effects of ocean acidification on key species, etc., in order to unify all this. But also because we need also actions, so we have to work together in order to tailor policy brief reports in order to target stakeholders and policymakers, so they can actually also take actions in this semi-enclosed sea that's really threatened. So so far we know these countries, what they are doing, the countries that are affiliated to our hub. We know exactly what Lebanon is doing and the time series stations that are there, what kind of parameters are there. And we do have a representative from there in the steering committee. So we are always giving visibility to the time series stations that are there. The same, for example, for France. And also we do have, so our steering committee members are elected by the community, by the ocean acidification members of that country. So let's say, for example, in France, Steve Como has been elected by the French scientists affiliated to our hub. So it's very, very democratic as well. And in that way, it's very inclusive. So who's doing what exactly? The same, for example, in Spain. And for Spain, Iris now is our hub. So I am representing the South Mediterranean countries. Iris is representing as well. We know also what's happening in Greece as well, Turkey, in Italy, in Egypt, what kind of parameters are being measured, and in Morocco, so what type of equipments are there, the vessels, etc. And we do have, of course, we are always evolving and trying to evolve. So we do have new entries in our hub like Monaco, Algeria, Malta, Slovenia, Croatia, and Cyprus. This is what we want. We want inclusivity, diversity, and to always have members who would actually enrich this and would also like join the forces in order to happening in our sea and to collaborate, to exchange, and this is super crucial nowadays. So we are trying in our hub also to take care of the gender balance, and we have to check how to minimize the balance between females and males, because females in our hub is a hugely more important than the male, which is something that we are so about. But what we are not really satisfied about actually is the difference between North and South Mediterranean scientists. So the majority of our ocean acidification members, they are affiliated to European countries from the north, and we still have so much things and efforts and trainings and capacity buildings to do in order to have more and more members from the South Mediterranean countries that is understudied, so the South Mediterranean realm. So these are the countries, and yeah, still have many things to do in order to improve the geographic representability of many countries. And yeah, I mean, you can always actually check our activities on the different social media platform as well. Then also you can check our activities on the Ocean Acidification Information Exchange. We do have there also a page. Now I'm going to highlight our activities and the main things that we've done so far. So one of the main things that we've done was a survey. We wanted to know who's doing what. So that was really crucial, because in that way we were able to know each lab, what are they doing, what the parameters they are measuring, what type of accuracies, precisions they do have. And this is really critical, because in that way, we were able also to identify who can collaborate with whom. And for example, if a lab is doing research on, let's say, the effects of ocean acidification on echinoderms, for example, or corals, and other scientists from the hub are interested in that, they can exchange, etc. We are also trying to identify always ways of collaboration through cruises, intercomparison exercises, and these uh, exchanges of PhD and master students because we believe that this is the future of our hub, so of the ocean acidification community. We have to always work on that. And we are trying now, because one of the most serious challenges in not only as a OA Med Hub, but as a Goa on community, is to identify labs that are able to produce certified reference materials. We are trying also to check opportunities and maybe possibilities in our area and this sea in order to also avoid having any shortage of certified reference materials that are really crucial for our measurements and the quality of our measurements. And also, of course, we always try to participate in the organization of events like, for example, the Goa On series of webinars and the Ocean start in the 30th of October, in addition to lots of in-person events. So we are trying to do so much scientific stuff, like, for example, organizing key sessions and key events like the ASLO meeting, for example. But also we are trying to bridge gaps between science and society. One of the examples was a survey that was actually not only globally, but also in many Mediterranean countries in order to check how the different Mediterranean public nations are aware of ocean acidification and its consequences. We are always trying to also disseminate information related to ocean acidification in the Mediterranean Sea and the latest research in our sea during Ocean Acidification Week, for example, in 2020, but also in 2021, and trying also to participate in events that are highlighting the political aspects of science. And our hub is full of political things. So we are trying somehow to bridge between science and diplomacy. For example, participating in high-level political forums, but also in the Monaco Ocean Week, where actually we had the opportunity to talk with so many stakeholders, ministries, etc. It was, and it is always crucial to talk with these people, not just tell them what are we doing, but also to inform them about the preferable actions that they have to take into consideration in order to really improve the situation as well. The OEMED Hub is a UN voluntary commitment endorsed by Goa On, and this is something really critical. And in order to have be a UN voluntary commitment, also we do have deliverables to provide and to report. So like organizing meetings, etc., expand the network, to do a survey, etc., but also to prepare an overview paper in order to report about the ocean acidification trends in the Mediterranean and its effect. And for that last deliverable, we've actually have published a paper. So what I want to say that in the Mediterranean, we know that we have lots of research. We didn't have systematic review on a status quo and the future. I mean, what's really requested or let's say demanded from the community in order to improve the ocean acidification research in the Mediterranean Sea. So we've conducted this study, which is a bibliometric systematic overview that was endorsed also by the IAEA or ICC of Monaco. And in this, that was the first systematic review article ocean acidification in the Mediterranean. So why was it important and how we've done it? I'm gonna just give a glimpse of that. So we try to really be as much inclusive as possible. So we try to involve chemistry people who have a thorough and important chemistry expertise in order to better know and write and report about the chemistry of the Mediterranean, but also biogeochemistry of the Mediterranean, the biology of the Mediterranean, modeling, and what are the different thresholds, the different projections, etc. People related to socioeconomy, to ecosystem services, to the governance and policies, and people who knows about the present and actually legislations related to ocean acidification. So we were around 16 researchers, and we've tackled around 7 ocean acidification related topics. And we were from 15 Mediterranean institutions. So we consider this effort as an exemplar. This should be done in the future. And we relied on our overview, systematic overview on the resources that are already existing by the IAEA, ICC, which is the OAICC database. And for that, actually, we collected around 564 articles and documents, gray literature, etc., that were reporting ocean acidification in the Mediterranean Sea. And then we've done our inspection, verification. We've removed all the articles that weren't actually reliable enough, etc. But also we tried to check the country of the first author, the region of the study, whether it is in the north, the south, east, west of the Mediterranean Sea, the type of the study, whether it is modeling or in situ or just pure biogeochemical study. What are the ocean acidification trends from these studies? What are the seasonal pH, the anthropogenic CO2, if it's mentioned? What are the studied biological groups, etc.? But also, because we wanted to be as much inclusive as possible when we will provide our recommendations, we also tried to establish a survey. And that survey was really crucial because it was disseminated among the different members. And we got really nice feedback from the community on the most urgent recommendations for the next steps that should be adopted by the community in general. And that was very helpful because we were able to identify the main urgent gaps, but also the recommendations. So our study shows clearly that the peak of ocean acidification studies in the Mediterranean Sea started with 2 big pan-Mediterranean studies or projects, CIASM in 2008 and 2012. These actually were very crucial, and it shows very clearly that in order to better have, let's say, to make a topic mainstream, it's better to have a like a global or regional project that could actually unite the different scientists in order to invest their time and resources in that topic, like, for example, ocean acidification. So we can see clearly that the number of studies have been increasing after these projects. And then there was the MedSea project, which was an important project in the area that was also unifying several Mediterranean countries. So it wasn't only a European project, but actually something really Mediterranean. And we can see clearly, I mean, the products of these projects and even, I mean, colleagues who weren't really experts in ocean acidification, they were triggered to start ocean acidification research because it was getting a momentum due to these projects. Unfortunately, recently we are seeing a decrease of ocean acidification research. That's because of many reasons that in our paper, and we clearly see that we need to reboost this, and for sure we need also like let's say energize and galvanize the research in this topic again. Also, we've discovered, so what has been published, and 86% of the items are peer-reviewed articles, while only 2% are reports or documents related to policymakers, only 2%. So then we were trying to check what type of, I mean, which basin is much more studied in the Mediterranean, and it's clear that the Western Mediterranean is much more studied than the Eastern Mediterranean, and it's mainly because it's better surrounded by the North European countries that are more resourceful, and while in the South, I mean, lots of institutes there do not have the needed expertise and the resources to start this. But also the Mediterranean scale studies were very few as well. This is something, this is a shortcoming that we've highlighted as well. And regarding the type of the studies, we clearly have mentioned that I mean, the main studies are related to biogeochemistry, like the carbonate system parameters, what's the trend of ocean salt in inorganic ocean carbon, the trends of pH, etc. Lots of studies related to experimental biology, which means the study of the effects of ocean acidification on specific biological groups in labs, but rare were the studies related to paleontology, to socioeconomy, to the technological aspect of how to improve ocean acidification observations in the Mediterranean Sea, to modeling, but also to policy studies. These were really very few in the Med area. And one of the, like, we only had one study that was tackling the carbon dioxide removal aspect. This is, of course, a very important shortcoming. And this helps actually the community to know what is needed. I mean, where they should invest their time and resources in the future. We were also trying to check what countries are doing, like investing the more in ocean acidification, what type of groups, etc. And we've seen that non-Mediterranean countries are among the groups that are the most interested in ocean acidification research in the Mediterranean Sea. And that's because of many things, because one of the main and unique things in the Mediterranean Sea is the presence of CO2 vents. CO2 vents can play a very important role as an analog of what could happen in the future if ocean acidification would continue in this way. And that's why lots of international scientists were coming to the Mediterranean in order to do their experiments and to do their studies near CO2 vents without really collaboration with Mediterranean institutes and scientists. So we can here also see clearly the productivity of each country, but also we can clearly see that not only Mediterranean countries were involved in ocean acidification studies of the Mediterranean, but also other countries like the US, Canada, Brazil. We have one study also from India, Australia, etc., etc. So many colleagues from the international community are interested to come to the Med and to do their ocean acidification studies as well. There is, of course, a huge gap that was highlighted just a few slides ago about the North and South gap. So we can see clearly that the blue color here, we do have much more publications from the North Mediterranean countries compared to the South Mediterranean countries that are in orange color. It's almost like these studies are like existing almost. However, also we do have so much studies from non-Mediterranean countries, as I've already mentioned. Now, then we have actually tried to dig more, so beyond bibliometry, and to check what are the different aspects of ocean acidification in the Mediterranean Sea in terms of chemistry, biology, policy, etc. So in terms of ocean acidification, the chemical studies, we've seen clearly that there is a huge gap between the different sub-basins in the Mediterranean. And we know that in the Mediterranean, there are many deep water mass formations. These water mass formations that could actually alter and change so much the carbonate system, and they can alter how the acidification patterns are distributed in the Mediterranean, etc. They are not studied equally as well. And we've seen that also uh, we need more and more studies related to the role of different subbasins as a sink or source of CO2 to the. Although we know that the majority of Mediterranean subbasins act as a net sink of CO2 globally, we've seen that there are so much gaps in biogeochemical studies in the straits and the channels of the Mediterranean Sea, like, for example, in the Otranto Strait, in the Sicily Strait, but also in the Strait of Gibraltar that's connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. These are significant shortcomings if we are interested to better understand the chemical background of ocean acidification in the Mediterranean Sea. And these shortcomings have to be addressed in the future as well in order to improve our knowledge. Also, we need more studies related to the Levanten intermediate water, which is an intermediate water that's formed here in the Levanten Sea, and it's circulating in all Mediterranean subbasins. And it was, and it is actually circulating also outside of the Mediterranean Sea toward the Atlantic. So investing in studying more this water mass is also very crucial and needed in the future. Then we were actually interested to check what kind of carbonate systems are studied in the Mediterranean. So based on the studies that we've tackled, that we've investigated, actually, we've seen that the two most measured parameters by the ocean acidification community in the Mediterranean Sea were, first of all, pH and total alkalinity, and then total dissolved organic carbon. So these were the main parameters, let's say, that were actually tackled by Mediterranean community. So, and we now know that the acidification trend is varying between minus 0.055 and minus 0.157 pH units. And the anthropogenic CO2, we've seen also that all Mediterranean waters, from the surface to the deepest layers, are already invaded by anthropogenic CO2. So no water mass in the Mediterranean is free of anthropogenic CO2. This CO2 is actually ranging between 29 and 137 micromole per kilogram. However, in some water masses, it's really high. The concentration is really high. And we've seen also that this concentration is very high in the west, much more than the east basin of the Mediterranean Sea. So it's clear that all Mediterranean waters are already affected by ocean acidification, already invaded by anthropogenic CO2. And that's why it was also needed to check the biological studies. So based on our biological assessment of the different biological studies, we've seen that mollusks are the most studied groups, biological groups in the Mediterranean. And this has many reasons, maybe also because they were easier to study, much more attractive, like those gastropods, etc. The mollusks in general, the mussels, the oysters, they are expensive. And usually they are super demanded by many Mediterranean populations and communities to for their, livelihoods, and in the in the touristic sector, restaurant sector, etc. It's very, very demanded. So lots of studies have been conducted to study the mollusks, but also algae, corals. Corals are very, very emblematic and very sexy groups to study, and that's why also they are among the top biological groups studied. However, there are different groups that are not really well studied So we don't really know yet the potential effects of ocean acidification on viruses, on pteropods, on brachiopods, on chordata, on foraminifera, on microbes, porifera, and on sponges. These are key biological groups that we don't really know much yet about in the Mediterranean, and we need to focus our future studies on them as well. Regarding these biological studies, we wanted also to check whether these studies are related to field studies. Are they field studies? Like, for example, the researchers have been going to the sea and taking samples directly and doing their studies and sampling cruises like monthly or weekly, etc., in a long-term fashion in order to understand their responses? Or was it a laboratory study? Or was it also a field vent study? So were they only studying these responses near CO2 vents, which is actually a bit controversial because these have like really extreme conditions? Or was it a paleo study, a modeling study, mixed, etc.? And we've seen clearly that field and field mesocosm studies are unfortunately among like a minority of these studies. And this is a very important actually conclusion that we've had. And it's clear that we need more and more field studies in order to realistically understand the effects of the different biological groups on towards ocean acidification. And then we were interested to see if these studies that were tackling ocean acidification potential effects on key biological groups, were they actually taking into consideration only ocean acidification as a stressor, or also additional stressors like temperature, nutrient, light plus nutrient, salinity, etc., because we know that studying only ocean acidification effects is not realistic as well. Especially now, I've started my slides mentioning other stressors in the Mediterranean. So not only ocean acidification, but also warming, eutrophication, etc. And thus, studying only ocean acidification is not really realistic. So, but we can see that the majority of the studies published about biological responses have been tackling only ocean acidification, which means only like trends of CO2 or pH on and their effects on biological groups without taking into consideration, for example, nutrients effects, water circulation, salinity, etc. And this is not realistic, and this is the shortcoming for sure. Then we also try to tackle the socioeconomic and policy aspect in the Mediterranean. It's clear that we've seen that the ocean acidification has many direct and indirect effects, and that's why it should be actually recognized as a regional threat on the Mediterranean resources, in addition, of course, to other stressors. And in order to improve the Mediterranean's unique and important ecosystems, we have to improve as well the resilience of its ecosystems. And that's actually through adopting good policies. But unfortunately, there is a huge lack in terms of policies in the Mediterranean. That's sometimes related to the data that could be a bit not accessible, for example, especially in the Mediterranean Sea. We do have inadequate access of data and restricted sharing of data and information. And that's actually affecting the decisions of policymakers and stakeholders in general, who claim that they do not have yet a good and let's say a thorougher impression of the effects of this phenomenon on the Mediterranean. So we need to better share the information and data with them in order to remove this excuse, of course. So the recommendations of this paper specifically were actually that the Mediterranean, in the Mediterranean, we still have many understudied subbasins that should be assessed. Certified reference materials is a huge problem in the Med, but also around the world globally, and that's actually a huge concern for the quality of our measurements. And we need more and more realistic and long-term studies that is taking into consideration not only pH and CO2 trends, but also other stressors as well, because we are living in a multi-stressor world, and we do have multi-stressor ocean, of course. We need to reinforce coordination at global, regional, and national levels in order to improve the governance and to take really better actions and maybe to implement. And also in order to inform stakeholders, policymakers about the importance of taking actions, we need to improve the ocean acidification literacy. This is key as well. And that's where actually regional hubs can play a really important role. So yes, climate change consequences know no boundaries. So we have to collaborate in order to really overwhelm this and to address this. So in the ocean acidification Mediterranean, we are always trying to also give visibility to such studies that are like really targeting the entire Mediterranean Sea, and that is inclusive. Like, for example, a recent study that has been done by one of our steering committee members, Nina Bednarsek, that was studying the ocean acidification as a governance challenge in the Mediterranean Sea, because it is one of really of the challenges that we need also to better tackle at the governance and political level as well, in order to know what are the mitigation adaptation actions that we have to take into consideration and to adopt as a community, not only scientific community, but I mean here as a Mediterranean community between the different Mediterranean countries, because there are many socio-ecological impacts and many, of course, economic impacts on our vulnerable communities. So the first ocean person steering committee, although we were formed in 2019, we had our first in-person meeting just this year in 2023. It was really something fantastic, thanks to a fund by the IAEA. It was in Mersin in Turkey that was very symbolic. So we had really a nice interactions with colleagues who are interested in our hub and in our studies in the Métier Institute, and we've presented lots of so chemical, biological, and other aspects also to the community. And then one of the things that we've done that we are really so much excited to now analyze their results was the intercomparison exercise that we've done for carbonate system parameters in the Mediterranean Sea. So we know that each Mediterranean lab is actually doing their own studies, so their own carbonate system parameters. So some labs, they are measuring only pH and total alkalinity. Others are measuring DIC and only DIC and total alkalinity, etc. And we need to compare our measurements and to check how much really the precision of our measurements is really different from each other. And that's why actually after that meeting, we took, so each lab, each representative of their nation, we took around 5 bottles of water collected from the same area during the same day, under the same conditions, in order to test, to analyze these waters in our respective labs and to compare it. And we are now running these samples and collecting the data as well. And we are super excited to know what's happening. So all this to show you the importance of collaboration. And we are so proud that work has been well recognized in one of the key reports that was published in the Mediterranean, published by MEDAC. And they actually very well highlighted our work, and that through a hub such as the OA Hub, we are able, it's a tool for adaptation for the Mediterranean area. And we are proud of that, especially that this report actually has been awarded the North-South Prize of the Council of Europe in 2021. And OA Hub has been one of its main as well components. Finally, I would like to re-emphasize on the importance of regional hubs. So we know we are able to do it. We've been able to do it in the Mediterranean, and I'm sure that other colleagues are able to do it elsewhere beyond the Mediterranean. And that's really crucial, because the climate change consequences, such as ocean acidification, do not know boundaries. And this threat is affecting our shared oceans and resources. So if we look at it economically, we have to team up in order to better understand this threat and to know how to face it as well. Time series monitoring stations and time series monitoring in general are key in monitoring and understanding ocean acidification, and we have to sustain these time series monitoring stations. So in that way, we will be like also following and implementing the UN SDG 14.3 in critical areas such as the Mediterranean, but also in other areas such as, for example, the Indian Ocean and other critical oceanic areas around the world. So supporting regional hubs is key to improve the collaboration between scientists, and also diplomacy speaking, it's important to bridge always, to build bridges of communication between scientists, policymakers, stakeholders, and the public. So you can also be part of such big and ambitious hubs through joining GOA and its regional hubs. You can identify the hub that you might actually be related to, like SAROA, of course, and be part of that. And of course, you can always reach us through our social media and the way IE. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Abed, for showing us the research and the activities happening in the Mediterranean region related to the ocean acidification. So now I will open the floor for the question and the discussion. So you can unmute yourself, and then one by one you can raise the question, or you can have discussion with us.